So Rodrigo, welcome to Upstream live stream in the Super Union studio.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you here today. Now you are the CMO of ESL, which is the world's largest eSports company. Esports is the fastest growing sport in the world. It is a cultural, media and business phenomenon among a certain demographic, certain audience, and yet there's probably a whole lot of people watching this, listening to this, who don't know too much about esports. So tell us to start with a little bit about what is esports and what does ESL do within that?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most common questions I'm asked is what is esports and how this came up to
every
exist.
Cab driver in London.
Yes, every cab driver in London. I always have asked this question. The esports is not a new phenomenon. It started many years ago, and sort of the history of esports is very much overlapping with the history of ESL. And if you think about back in 70s and the 80s when you had Pong and Space Invaders, as long as you had people playing computer games against each other, you start having some competitiveness, like in any other sport. And so it really started from there. And then late in the 90s, basically with internet and LAN parties and games like Quake and Doom, and people start playing online against each other. And really the competitive scene started. So esports started from there. And esports is really, in a simple description, is competitive gaming. Is a sport about competitive gaming where players are competing for prize money in large competitions, in tournaments and leagues, to be the best, like in any other sport.
And the scale of it is huge, isn't it? I mean, what are the kind of numbers around, perhaps not so much participation, but audiences? I mean, that's the key thing, right? It's the audiences that you attract in esports. They're just phenomenal.
Yes, it's incredible. There's latest studies came out around 500 million fans of esport last year.
Half a billion.
Half a billion,
Wow.
and there's around 2.5 billion gamers worldwide. So we still have a long way even to grow, but it's still a huge number. And so what is interesting about these audiences is that they are young, very dynamic, young generation Z, and so these are what we call the unreachables that brands want to try to get, and so they are, and they are with us throughout the whole time. But just picking up on the previous point on the history and where we get there, I tend to say all the time that ESL and esports is a phenomenon. A quick phenomenon that took 20 years to build.
Right.
And really the beginning of the history of the company back in 2000, when the founders of ESL decided to create ESL, they had this vision to create a place where the computer players, at that time the nerds, could become superstars and could become stars of the next generation. So they created these leagues and tournaments. And at the beginning, until 2010, the first 10 years, really the struggle to survive, because commonly you would hear, this is not a sport. Nobody wants to watch anybody play a computer game. You can't make a business model out of this. Right. It's impossible. Right. And so the teams are not only ESL, but a lot of different companies in the esports ecosystem just continue and trying to push that forward with a lot of vision, a lot of passion. And then it went to a second stage somewhere around 2010, 2015, where really esports became big, and there were the first stadium tournaments. We did the first one in Katowice in a large arena, 10,000 people, and then suddenly that hit the news, and around that time. And then the last 5 years, 2015 to today, we have seen a huge growth in esports. And so alone last year we had something like 240 million viewers of our own competitions. We did more than 20 large competitions worldwide in different countries, and the numbers are just phenomenal, and it's just growing. And with that, the whole industry professionalized itself. There was a lot of consolidation as well, and we're really at this third stage of growth. We are really, growing esports as a whole, as an ecosystem, and in a much more professional way.
Right, and it's incredibly professional, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned 10,000 people at Katowice, but you have like huge numbers of people coming to competition events in big arenas around the world. You have these many, there's 500 million people who are following and watching online elsewhere. You have a huge ecosystem of partners and brands associated. I mean, it's really big business, right? This is not just a phenomenon that's sort of slowly bubbling away in the background. This is big business.
It's a big business, and because we grew through 20 years, we have really, like any sport, we have competitions from amateur to pro, to top competitions. We have a whole baseline of literally hundreds of thousands of players that then end up in these large stadium events in the competition. So there's a whole ecosystem behind it. The teams are super professional. Teams today that are competing are companies that run like companies, that have proper management team, and they run a proper business. The players are super professional. They train 12 hours a day. They are paid like millionaires. They are seen as stars by the community. And then you have these large brands like we partner with Vodafone, AT&T, DHL, Mercedes, and so on, that came into this space. Some of them initially came in like Intel for more than 15 years with us because they believed in the scene. Other ones came because they believe now it's a huge business and it's a way of reaching in a very authentic way their target audience.
Right, because the audience is very young, right? The audience is predominantly, teens, early 20s?
Yes, so we go, the average age of our viewers is 28 years old, actually. Okay. But mainly, we are talking about teens, Gen Z, and young millennials.
I think, by the way, it's me that's bringing the average up, so everybody else is.
And me probably. What is interesting as well is that in many companies, the new generation of decision makers in companies also starts having an affinity to eSports. In the past, they would have affinity to traditional sports, football, golf, Formula One, and so on. And you see a lot of the management team in large companies changing. And the new generation of leadership actually understands gaming, and they were gamers themselves probably back in the 90s, and they understand it, and it just makes it much easier for brands to jump into this space as well.
Yeah. What sort of things can they do? I mean, what are the different types of opportunities that exist for brands to engage with ESL as a partner?
Well, there are a number of them. I think that the most what I say always to our brand partners the first time something really strikes them and gets them amazed is that when I say esports there's not a one esports community. That doesn't exist. Esports is made of several communities. Each game has their own specific community with their own. It's almost like a tribe.
Right.
And so the opportunity for brands here is really to authentically be part of that community, almost be like a member of that community, and really drive esports together with the community. I think that's the opportunity, because when this happens, something magical happens, which is then brands are loved by the fans, and so it's sort of a positive cycle. And so that's the opportunity for brands, is really to connect to a very difficult audience. This audience are, what we call the unreachables, very difficult to get. They don't watch TV. Yeah. They don't react to traditional media, very skeptical on that. They live online, but they love brands that actually do something meaningful
and engage directly
with them.
Yes. There's particular love I hear for DHL in this community. Tell us about that.
So DHL is one of the, we have many success stories because we apply a very similar formula to all of them, but DHL is probably the one that hits the news a lot of times, because it's probably the most odd brand that you think about why Gen Z and young millennials would love DHL. And so what we did with DHL is actually we tried to show DHL as a partner of ESL and helping us deliver the show. So DHL is embedded really into all our communication pieces throughout a long period of time. So when you think about an event like ESL One Cologne with 15,000 people in an arena, before there's a whole 6 months, 8 months of campaign leading up to that, where we show how DHL is helping us, actually physically delivering things to the event, enabling the show, delivering packages to the players. We do a lot of content pieces where to be honest, we get a bit of the permission from DHL to make a bit of fun, and DHL makes a bit of fun of themselves. And so DHL becomes almost like a part of the community. And so the result is quite spectacular, where you have unprompted, an arena of 10,000 people just yelling DHL, DHL, and that's just absolutely amazing. And that is done through very authentically integrating DHL throughout the whole journey, and not just placing a logo somewhere or paying media here and there. It's actually making sure that DHL or any other brand we work with is really part of the show.
And it's great. I mean, compared to a lot of traditional sport sponsorship, it is quite different in that respect, isn't it? That you can become an integral part of the experience that people are having. You can be woven into aspects of gameplay even, right? Whereas, of course, if you're sponsoring football or golf, you're not going to get anywhere near the kicking on hitting the ball.
Absolutely. I mean, we with DHL, picking up this example again, we actually did one film that we produced where it started at a DHL facility, where the team of DHL was actually packaging some of the potions for one of the game for Dota 2, and then DHL has a robot called Effie, which is an AI robot that they use to transport merchandise within the warehouses, and that leaves the warehouse and then starts the CGI part of the movie where actually Effie, the bot from DHL, gets into the game itself and actually delivers the potions to the heroes in the game, and then the game starts, the final starts. So this whole seamless integration and the storytelling works really well with brands.
Yeah. And how do you see it? So the audience group, predominantly younger, so you mentioned Gen Z and young millennials. I mean, do you think that the way that esports has grown and evolved and the whole change in the nature of the interaction that people have within different media, is that going to change the way that this audience behave in the future? What are the broader implications of esports on the way that a next generation is going to interact with brands and respond to marketing?
I think that is a very good question, because I think not only what we are doing with ESL and with DHL, Mercedes, Vodafone works really well, it also is getting these audiences accustomed to a certain type of marketing that didn't exist before, a very authentic, very integrated type of partnership between ESL, the fans, the teams, and the brands that come into this space. And I think this will just create raises the bar for all the other brands, honestly, in every type of activations they do. Because if you compare like for like a lot of the things we do with some of our brands and some other things that you see out there, for the same community, the rest doesn't feel so authentic anymore. And so I think the implications is that we are raising the bar in what it means to engage with an audience from a brand perspective, and I think that is not going away. And I think our fans love it; they are used to that, and so anything that is not like that is probably not going to be well received. So that's, I think, a large implication. The second one is as well that the fact that esports lives online. It just gives these brands a huge platform to engage over many years with not only esports fans but also gamers out there. If you think about brands that sponsored in the past Formula One, similar logic. You sponsor Formula One, you partner with Formula One, but you want to reach the audience that loves cars overall worldwide. And the same here. So by focusing on esports, these brands will have almost like an acceptance from the gamers to be engaged with, and so that's a huge potential since there's more than 2 billion gamers out there worldwide.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, how that audience can engage really, really deeply with a brand and with sort of facts about that brand in some ways. I mean, I was fascinated by the way that people will buy skins, for example, or add-ons in games that can be branded in some ways. So that they're just a sort of virtual cosmetic that in many cases don't even influence the quality of the gameplay, but they're a form of social currency, I guess, within the game. But there's a tendency to think of that as being, well, why would you spend money on something that's not real? But I guess it's no different to how people in the past would have bought replica football kits or other items that were physical that might wear 2 or 3 times and throw away again. But it leads to this very different level and quite deep level of engagement, doesn't it, with the brands and with the detail that sits behind them.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the games these days are nearly free of charge, and so there's a long life cycle of the games. The game industry changed a lot from selling boxes a few years ago of games, developed 2 years, sell a box, into a model where it's a software as a service, where the idea is to expand the lifetime of a game as long as you can. And esports is proven, Counter-Strike exists for 18 years. Esports is a proven methodology to expand the lifetime of a game. And within that, it's all about buying cosmetic items, creating content and branded content from the different games. And I think that phenomenon is quite impressive, because it allows basically a lot of self-expression, which is very important for Gen Z, to basically stand out from the crowd, show their difference, and so it's a huge opportunity for brands to get into that space. That phenomenon is something that a lot of brands don't know about yet. They are starting to explore, but within the gaming community is known for a while already, and it's fascinating to see the fact that people actually spend a lot of money investing in digital goods, and that's very important because that's how they are seen in the digital world, and how they are the same way as probably as back in the 80s when I would buy a pair of jeans and you want to show something with it, and that brand means something to you. I think that's a huge opportunity for brands to tap into that was not yet fully explored. forth.
Yeah, and you do have this very, very complex ecosystem. You've mentioned a couple of the games themselves, Counter-Strike, Dota 2. On the one hand, you've got all these different games that are part of the competition that are changing all the time. They're evolving constantly, they're updating, they're looking to prolong their lifetime. You've got this partner network of people that participate. You've got multiple events in multiple parts of the world. I mean, how do you manage that incredible rate of change, that constant state of flux that you're in? I mean, as CMO, how do you cope? How do you deal with it? How do you keep sane in all of that?
So it is a very fast-paced environment. It is we are in the middle of all of it, and we are a very fast-paced also company. The culture we have, the only way you stay up to date is actually not creating too many rules. We always say internally around, how do we unlock creativity? And the way we unlock creativity is actually by setting a few very broad rules. The work we did actually on our brand refresh this year, which was absolutely, you see here behind us, was absolutely fantastic. And with you guys, we basically went through defining, really what is the purpose of our company, and really we went back to the founding story I mentioned before to create this vision of where anybody could be somebody. And so we synthesized our brand positioning and brand purpose as to create a world where everybody can be somebody. And then the way we do that is that we create these ecosystems for games like CSGO, Dota 2 and other games, where we have a whole system from zero to hero, from amateur leagues into the top stadium events where you have 15,000 people watching and millions of people watching live. And so the way we do and unlock creativity and allow us to keep up to date with the trends is that we create a few boundaries, a clear direction with our brand purpose. The whole company is a very authentic one because it came from our founders. We set the whole structures in terms of what we want to achieve, and then we just let creativity flow, let our employees shine. And a lot of times we actually do not control a lot of things that are happening, and that's in a positive way. Right. So it's almost like we define the rules of a chess game, but then within those rules, there's infinite combinations that our employees do. And so that allows us all the time to do things like spot the next trends. When the next meme online that is happening in a community, a specific community of a game, we jump on top of that and we get the brand to jump together on top of that. So it allows us to be very much there. Rather than in previous experiences I had in my professional life, where sort of the whole communications and marketing was very controlled, and you always need to ask permission for somebody to speak to the community. We actually enable all our marketing teams to speak directly to the community. We take some risks with that, but it pays off because it allows us to be very quick, know things very quickly, and then react very quickly to what is happening out there.
Yeah. Which is a great lesson. I mean, it must be. I mean, the rate of growth is phenomenal, right? I mean, so how many events or how many competitions are you staging?
Well, the largest stadium events are 12. Then we have another 8 or 10 national competitions, and then we have hundreds of smaller online competitions, and then thousands of smaller online ones. So I think it's something last year we had something more than 10,000. Online competitions, and it's really a pyramid. So you start online competing, you move up the ranks in each game, and you end up in that arena. But it takes time to get there. But unlike traditional sports, where it might take you 18 years of your life to get to a professional career, and then you take many years to get from a small club into Real Madrid or Manchester United. In esports, it can happen quite quickly. So you can really go from zero to hero within a year or so.
And incredibly inclusive as well, right? So anybody, you're not limited by sort of natural gifts of physical attributes necessarily, right? Anybody can participate.
Absolutely, that's an excellent point, Jim, because one of the stories that I think we need to tell more to the outside world is that esports is the most inclusive sport in the world. All our competitions are open for anybody, anybody with disabilities, gender, anybody. You typically see male, the top teams are male, because they have 15 years of a professional scene going on, but actually all competitions are open for everybody. So in a sense, esports is the biggest equalizer in the world of sport, because it allows really a level playing field. And now with mobile esports in the hands of everybody, and last year we launched 2 large competitions, one in Europe, one in US with Vodafone and AT&T, on mobile esports. Mobile esports is then democratizes that into the next level because everybody has access to a device and can compete from anywhere.
Right.
And so when you qualify from online qualifiers up to the physical events where you are in a stadium, it just makes it's much more inclusive. And the proof that it works is that last year we had more than 500 million reach just on one of the competitions in the debut year of a mobile competition. So that's going to be quite exciting to see how mobile esports develops over the next years.
Right, and 5G surely going to make a huge difference there, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be predicting further explosion of participation and engagement, haven't you, with that?
And like 4G, when 4G was launched, where it was more bandwidth, but it really didn't change too much for gaming. 5G really is a game changer for gaming. The biggest advantage of 5G is not only the bandwidth, but the biggest one is low latency. And for online competition, the latency is basically the time that it takes from you to press a button on your device, and that movement happening in the game, and you having a response back. And 5G enables that to be done almost like you do today in fiber at home. And so it just takes the mobile esports or mobile gaming to the next level. And so you'll probably see an explosion of use cases around cloud gaming, around mobile gaming and esports, powered by 5G. That's why brands like Vodafone or AT&T are partnering with us, because they see the opportunity, again, in a very authentic way. They are enabling the next generation of esports with 5G. And that's a very interesting story to tell and to work with our fans.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you must have an incredible number of technologists working for you, like constantly looking at that. I mean, certainly across the whole gaming ecosystem. I mean, there must be, millions of people, right? Like at the cutting edge of technology.
So gaming, the good thing about gaming is that gamers, and these days any teenager is a gamer, so it's no longer the odd person, anybody. So who's the ones that are not a gamer are the odd ones in a classroom when you are in high school. And so gamers tend to be the early adopters of most technologies, and so they keep us on the edge always, our fans. So they keep us always in a position where we need to innovate. We need to adopt the latest technologies, the latest broadcast technologies, the latest social media approaches, and so that's quite positive. And then on our side, of course, we have we do a lot on research and development, and we invest a lot especially on our broadcast, so that the experience is seen at home in the best way possible. And because it is a digital sport and is a digital broadcast, we can inject into the broadcast different things. We can change things on the broadcast that you could not change on a football game, where the football game is what it is. We can change things, so we can evolve the whole broadcast experience. I tend to say all the time, there's when you take brands to a tour at our events, and they see a competition on Fortnite or PUBG or Counter-Strike or Dota, you see the amount of cameras we have, because we have many more cameras in certain games than you have on traditional sports.
Right.
A game like PUBG or Fortnite, 80 players, 200 players, each one has their camera, then the camera that they see, so 160, 200 cameras, then you have these spider cameras all over the place. So sometimes we have more than 100, 200 cameras, and our production team needs to select shots live from those.
That's quite a directorial task, isn't it?
That's our directors say all the time. The traditional sports broadcast is for amateurs, and so that forces us to have a lot of technology as well in our broadcast to pre-select images, understand really the game, predict a lot of it, because it's very fast-paced, and it's quite difficult to actually get the action on screen.
Right.
And so all of those things, and the communities are very demanding, and all those things just keep us constantly force us to innovate and develop, which then produces very positive results, because then the community reacts really well. And if you go to one of our events of Counter-Strike, for example, it's just amazing, the energy in the room and watching the broadcast.
Yeah, I've got to come along. My son is a huge Counter-Strike fan.
Yes,
we've got to get him along and have a look at something. But some games are much more audience friendly than others, right? Fortnite, for example, not the best spectator sport in the world. Counter-Strike, much better in that respect. That's right, isn't it?
That's right. Yes, that's right. So a lot of people get confused gaming with esports. Esports is always gaming, but not all games are done for esports.
Right.
If you look at the population worldwide, half are male, half are female of the population of gamers worldwide. But when you look at eSport, is still a bit more male skewed. And so there are some games, things like Candy Crush and so on. They are games, but they're not esports material. And so with Fortnite, it's the most popular game in the world currently. There are esports competitions and we organize them, but it doesn't have yet the professional scene as, for example, Counter-Strike has. Counter-Strike has 18 years of a professional team scene with professional players, long existing organizations, professional structures. Fans, that are super loyal for many years, more than 10 years, to some of the brands, the team brands. And so there's a whole ecosystem. And then the game itself is fantastic to watch because it's basically fast-paced, quick rounds, 5 against 5, and it's very easy for anybody to pick. The rules are not very difficult to understand, very difficult to master the skill level. So when you are watching this, the professional players play, it's just amazing what they can do. But it's quite easy to get in. Anybody can spend 10 minutes in one of our stadiums and understand what it's all about and have fun with it. Whilst on a game like Fortnite is a bit more complicated because there's more players and so on. So different games are at different stages of development. We always say that games will change. ESL will stay in the future. So we have a multi-game strategy. We'll always organize tournaments and leagues of the largest games. And
it's more like the Olympics in that sense, right?
Yes.
That you're providing a platform for multiple sports.
Absolutely, and we don't have a preference. We really want to, create a world where everybody can be somebody. So that doesn't matter for us in which game, in which platform. And we honestly invest a lot on some smaller publishers and smaller games to create those online leagues and try to see if they become an esport on their own. And then at the same time, of course, we take a lot of benefit of the large stadium events with the large established IPs that are out there. But we constantly try to bring new games. Fortnite didn't exist 3 years ago.
Right.
PUBG didn't exist 3 years ago. So some of the biggest games out there are new, and so the landscape is constantly changing, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now, look, some people do have concerns about certain gaming, certain esports environments, where people worry about in-game violence, people worry about too much screen time, etc. But actually, you're doing an awful lot that is very, very purposeful. And we talked a little earlier on about the purpose. We talked about inclusivity, but at the heart of ESL is a very broad agenda, isn't it? This is part of, I think, the shift that's going on in the world is an understanding that esports is a sport, and it is a genuine and a good way that people can spend time, from a social perspective and so forth. But there's a lot more to it, isn't there, than just a lot of people getting together and spending their time playing computer games.
Yes, actually, I joined the company ESL 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and one of the things that excite me were actually two things. One was to tell this founding story that we now synthesize on our brand purpose to create a world where everybody can be somebody, because this story was so authentic. 20 years ago, the founders started the company to really create these stages, and now here we are. And so that story was not told enough. So that was one of the key things I wanted to do. The second one was actually to show the world how I see and how we see esports at ESL and gaming. We see gaming as a positive force for society. We see gaming as something that brings people together. We see gaming as and esports as the most inclusive sport in the world. And we want to tell those stories. And so we have embarked on our corporate social responsibility agenda, which is very keen for me, which has 4 pillars. One around inclusion, so telling really that story to the world that esports is the most inclusive sport in the world. Then also around integrity. So a lot of people don't know, but it's actually a quite regulated sport. So we have doping controls. We did more than 350 doping controls over the last couple of years. We have rules, there's regulations, so to show and to drive integrity into esports like any other type of sport, because fair play is important for us. The third thing is around smart gaming. So show ways and educate a lot of society. What does it mean, smart gaming? Because a bit like I tend to tell a lot of my friends ask me, I have my teenage son or daughter, they're playing a lot of Fortnite or playing this game, is it good or bad? And I say, it's a bit, the rule is a bit like, think about TV in the 90s. You would not like your children to spend 12 hours, 14 hours a day just sitting down in front of a TV screen and not doing anything. And so it's about balance in life. You need to be good in school, do sports, and then there's a space for gaming, for social interaction. Gaming, as part of that, can be quite positive because it helps actually to develop a lot of skills, communication skills, problem solving, confidence, how to lead teams. A lot of these games we have teenager players with 13 years old leading a team for an objective, setting a strategy, and in real time making decisions faster and in a more reasonable way than a lot of grown-ups. So telling a lot that story about smart gaming is important and educate a lot and help society to understand. And then the last one is about gaming for good. It's show how gaming can be a positive force for society. We have a partnership with Gamers Outreach, which I'm very proud of. Gamers Outreach is our charity partner. Basically what they do is they bring gaming into hospitals worldwide for children that need to undergo long-term treatment of cancer or heart transplant or something like this, where the only thing that sometimes motivates them to have a will to fight a disease or a condition is actually to have this we call it a go-kart, where they have a computer or a console in their room and they can play and interact also with their friends and be connected to the outside world, where sometimes they need to spend 12 months in a room smaller than this in a hospital. So showing how gaming can help society is also a very important thing for us. And so this agenda is very keen for us because it's also very authentic. This is how we believe the world to look like through our eyes. We are gamers. We are not worried about the violence. We think the violence topic is not a topic, and actually we invite everybody that has a question. And a lot of our brands do that when we start with some games, and then we bring them to a Counter-Strike event, and everybody's just amazed, because it's not only a fantastic show, it's super entertaining. The engagement of the crowd is fantastic, but also it's very civilized. You see a demographic that is affluent, that is super organized. They are always online, but they are always very respectful. You don't see any violence. The teams, the supporters of the teams are mingled together. In a football stadium, you need to separate them. They're all mingled together. They party together. This. So when you are there, you see it's a different world. And the important thing for brands to understand, and they get this after with our help as well, is they see that for the fans, they don't see violence. They see professional players competing for the highest skill level and trying to win a prize money and trying to win a competition, be the best at something. It's like any other sport. And so therefore that's a reality. That's what we try to portray, and that's what what our fans honestly how they see esports as well.
I mean that is an amazing and very compelling response to that question. I mean, I really think that's incredible. And the nature of gameplay itself is that I mean, there are very strict rules about how you have to behave when you're in game in those situations as well. I mean, you can easily get banned as a player if you behave inappropriately. It is really interesting the way that whole nature of gameplay, I think, changes the attitudes that people would take.
Absolutely, and more the rules are less important, because as the teams are all super professional, they themselves have an interest to present themselves in the proper way to their fans, to society. And so as time goes by, actually the rules are there, and we create a lot of rules and to make sure that it is run as a proper sport. But actually the professionalization of all the teams and the players and so on helps a lot. And we are talking about multi-million-dollar companies, all these teams, and so the players, a lot of them are paid like millions of dollars a year. So it's in their best interest actually to be portrayed as positive forces out there, rather than and be role models for young generations. And they feel, a lot of them, this pressure, like a football player like Ronaldo feels, that a whole generation looks up to them. And so they feel this, and I think they are, like in any other sport, taking I love to see them taking ownership and being a role model to society.
That's fantastic. So one last question. You've been on this incredible 20-year journey as a company. The pace of change is getting faster and faster. The world is unpredictable enough as it is, but I'm going to ask you to predict what's next for ESL. I mean, one thing we can probably rely on is the fact that you're going to continue to grow and drive into new areas. What do you see coming next?
So I think we are just at the start. We always, I always say that we have a we play a long-term game. So we are not looking for an exit of the company or anything in the next few years. We are actually looking a bit like FIFA or whatever. In 100 years, we probably are here. That's our plan. So I think the main objective is to actually perpetuate the game rather than and be there. And so within that, there's a huge potential for growth. And as I said, there's more than 2 billion gamers out there, and just 500 million are watching esports. Would be, if you compare to another sport, would be, like in football, there is, more than 2 billion people playing actually, but watching much less, which sounds a bit contradicting. It's the other way around. So there's a huge growth opportunity. So what we will see a lot is we will see a lot more people watching, and the shift changing a lot from the hours played to the hours watched. The hours watched will continue to grow dramatically to the point that will be X number of times the hours played. So that will be one change. The other change will be that we'll continue. Esports is already mainstream. Some people ask me, "Is it mainstream?" Yes, it is mainstream. Ask any 18-year-old, 20-year-old, and they will tell you it's their lives. It's probably one of the top, if not that number one, interest in their lives ahead of music and other things. But also, what we'll see is that we'll see more and more brands coming into esports, and we have a lot of the large hitting brands already. You'll see Olympics next year, for example, in Tokyo. We are esports will be there as well, and so we will be organizing that through our partnership with Intel. We did already in the previous Winter Olympics as well. So you'll see esports, take a stage where traditional sports are at and continue to grow over the next years. I think from a business perspective, there will continue being a lot of consolidation in the industry. So we are the largest esports company in the world, but we think there's a lot of room for the pie to grow for everybody, but still there is a lot of consolidation that probably will happen. And so I think we are still in the middle of a journey of this professionalization and growth. And then in terms of technology-wise, I would say mobile is probably the biggest opportunity out there. We saw the amazing numbers this year, and we think mobile has the opportunity to really take esports to the next level of billions of participation.
Rodrigo, it's an amazing story. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today. ESL is an amazing organization. I mean, I've got to say, brands have got to be giving you a call and get engaged. I mean, it is just such a compelling proposition on so many levels. But thanks so much for joining us today on Upstream.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure being here and speaking about esports.
Great.
Thank you, Jim.